So, Saran Uthayakumar, welcome to Khmer Voices, where we shine a spotlight on the achievements of the Cambodian diaspora around the world. I'm your host, Vanny, aka Vanny. My voice has been impaired. This is a result of just using my voice too much over the weekend for an inaugural gala hosted by the Cambodian Cultural Center. You'll be hearing more about that, but I'm going to try and save my voice to introduce this episode. I originally was going to air part 2 of My Voices Turns 1, so the last 6 of the 12 takeaways, but I just got wrapped up in this big event and the details, and you know how it goes. So I thought I would share my interview that I had with a person by the name of Saran. He's Sri Lankan Tamil American, and he is doing a PhD dissertation on the interrelationship between second generation experiences of Cambodians and Tamils in the diaspora. And he interviewed me as part of his research. And Saran has been kind enough to offer an introduction to himself as well. So I hope you enjoy getting to know Saran a little bit and getting to know me a little bit more as well.
I wanted to thank Vanny for having me on some of this podcast episode. And my name is Saran. I am Sri Lankan Tamil. Tamil is a ethnic and a linguistic group that is native to India and parts of northern and eastern Sri Lanka. My parents came there from there during the 1980s to the United States, wherein there was a civil war that began in Sri Lanka in 1983, and it ended around 2009 when I was 9 years old. So I very much grew up in a household with my parents who were recovering from their own experiences while still witnessing, hearing about some of what was going on back in Sri Lanka. And this was very formative to my understanding early on in my life that I was a child of refugees, even if my parents didn't necessarily think of themselves as that, given that we couldn't really go back home with everything that was going on. And this kind of disconnect from my own home heritage, my culture, really did affect how I even thought of myself, how I identify more broadly with Asian Americans rather than my own community. So when I went to France, thanks to my now best friend Mira Toshu, who is from France, we really were able to connect our cultures in a way that had never really occurred to us before. Mira is French Khmer. She was French, but she is French, but she is adopted by French parents. So that also particularizes her experience, I think, as someone who was born in Cambodia and then later was raised also not really knowing her heritage. So we very much both had this interest in kind of reconnecting to our home heritage. And I think there's also the coincidence of us meeting when we did and us realizing that we also had this, darker history to both of our countries. And Mira and I, especially, were really, how you say, driven, and we wanted to focus on our communities that have been dispersed by the conflicts from the Khmer Rouge and then also in the Tamil genocide that was happening in Sri Lanka. And so when we finally, started talking and Mira got the idea and she started her own project about interviewing members of the French diaspora and the American diaspora amongst Khmer Americans and French Khmer folks. And she did those interviews for a few months. And after some time, we were going to go our separate ways. But I was returning back to California, where, as many of you know, the largest Cambodian diaspora is to this day. And I asked Mira because I was going to enter academia if this was a project she still was curious about continuing. And until then, Mira had mainly been working on kind of the diasporic question about healing and reconciliation and the perception of what was going on in Cambodia since the trials of the Khmer Rouge. And I told her, absolutely, I'd love to, you know, continue your work, but I also think I would like to see the kind of Cambodian American experience that is very local to the story that, I was familiar with growing up and didn't really know that much about. And my familiarity with the topic was the Cambodian Americans who were in my local kind of Orange County area, where many of them were donut shop owners. And this community, similar to the Long Beach community, very much made their way into that kind of donut shop industry because of Ted Noy, who many of you know about now because of the Donut King film. And I told Mira, maybe I can go around, do some interviews, see if we can continue your project. And with Mira's support, I was able to continue this. And, I'm so grateful that I very much learned instantly that I knew very little. And me naively going to donut shops asking folks about their perceptions on transitional justice wasn't necessarily, as you imagine, an easy feat. Most people had little to no knowledge of, what transitional justice meant. It was a very political science term and something that I, as an outsider, was pushing on. So I instead wanted to kind of, let me listen, let me see what the community is talking about. And I met my now other really close friend, Mei Li Tao, who many of you know as the author of her book, An American Dream with Sprinkles. And Mei Li and I, we really connected over her mother's story and her experiences growing up, trying to understand that story and retell that story. And Mei Li connected me to her own community, and that really opened up my entire world. And from there, the project shifted from what Mira and I originally were talking about transitional justice, looking at questions of genocide and post-genocide reconciliation, and looking more into the communities that were displaced by genocide and understanding what our refugee communities were experiencing, what our identities were being shaped by, and this question of our parents' trauma, but also our parents' healing and our own personal healing. So through Mei Li, I met some really incredible people. I'm very grateful to have heard their stories. And from those stories, I decided that this is very much the story that I want to tell. I want to talk about the second generation of Khmer folks, but also of Sri Lankan Tamils like myself, who are doing the work of understanding their parents' trauma, processing that trauma, but then also rebuilding upon that. So rather than focusing on this, cycle of continually talking about genocide, how we're also reframing, redefining, and kind of rebuilding an entire culture from that point zero. And so this is very much that story that I'm trying to tell in my dissertation. The dissertation title is From the Mud, Lotuses Still Bloom. And the reason I chose this metaphor is that the lotus is a very important symbol, and Mira and I have talked about this and, getting lotus tattoos or something of that nature to really symbolize the importance to the Cambodian experience, where the lotus is a flower that still can grow amid such harsh conditions and is a symbol for resilience. But in the Tamil community, the Tamara Pu, or the lotus flower, is also a very potent symbol about the future. This idea that there is potential for growth and wealth and success from the flower. So I chose the lotus because it talks about a symbol for both of our communities. And the mud, I think, represents all of this trauma, all of these narratives about us being not model minorities, right? Us being unfit for the kind of wider narrative about Asian Canadians and Asian Americans because we came from genocide. And instead, I hope that we can understand that the mud and the lotus are very much intertwined. We can't necessarily remove ourselves from what we came from, but we can focus on what's next or what the present is telling us and how this flower blooms. And so that is why I kind of wanted to focus more on the growth aspect, the life after death, the survival that our parents experienced is very important to talk about. But I'm more interested in our generation and how we carry that legacy, we carry that responsibility, and what do we do with it? So in that way, we cannot separate our past from our present, but perhaps we can redefine it, we can rebuild, and we can also take ownership of it and reinvent our identities. So that's what I'm hoping to tell through this dissertation and talking through both of our communities' experiences for the first time in a conversation that is one very much one and together. And I really want to just emphasize that this is not the first time that our communities have connected. I think the story of the Ramayana, the Ramkar, is the reason our communities are connected to this day. Our ancient histories were once connected. Angkor, as we know, was an ally of the Tamil kingdoms. The Tamil kings brought Hinduism to Cambodia. We know that this is a very rich history shared between our peoples. So why not try to connect our peoples again after war and after we became boat people? Thank you. First question I
Fantastic.
had was really, the intro basic bio, but I
Hmm.
think I heard your episode and now I'm like, okay, I feel like I can go back to that for the bio specifically. But
I'm
there were
happy to
parts
do it again.
But there were parts of it that I think you also admitted to that you didn't get to talk about. And one of them was like your relationship with your parents
Uh-huh.
and just like your role in the family. And like,
Yeah.
I think that's something I'm really always interested in is just like, what was kind of your experience growing up with your parents? Like, did they talk about what they went through at all? Or was that always kind of just a mental jigsaw you did on your own?
Yeah, more of the latter. They would just kind of mention it in passing,
Hmm.
and I wouldn't get a full story. Like I'd get like maybe three or four sentences. So I never really had like a deep conversation with my parents. And I'm still, I don't know, I want to get to that part. I want to get to sit down with one of them at a time and
Yeah.
have them tell their story to me. But I'm also kind of scared that I won't be able to handle it. Like I'll probably just
Mm.
be ugly crying the whole time. Like I was only talking about my life, which is easy compared to what they had to experience, and I was
Right.
bawling. So I shouldn't let that stop me, but I'm just scared to see my parents in a different way too, and
No.
just feel guilt for um the way I what I put them through, even though I don't think I put them through that much compared to, other people. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that was a particularly important detail that I think you're the eldest daughter.
I am, yeah. So
S-
I broke the ice. I'm the eldest daughter, born in 1981. My brother's 84. My brother, obviously, because he's a boy, got to do whatever he wanted, didn't have to do chores, got to go to the mall at an earlier age, later too, without any question, because he's a boy. And me, I scared that I would get into a gang, scared that I would get pregnant, scared that I would drop out of high school. There's just all the fears I that they had for their kids. I had to be like the filter. I had to kind of go through it first. And then I guess they realized that, hey, she's gonna do what she wants to do, and the best that we can do is guide her. But they were really strict growing up.
Yeah.
Yeah, no boyfriends or anything. Although I think they suspected I had boyfriends because I did have guys call the house, but they were never. But like, how do you stop that? I could just say like, oh, he's calling about homework, you know?
Yeah. Group
Yeah,
projects.
yeah,
That's what I,
exactly.
yeah. I am curious based on that one of the kind of expectations sometimes is that the older sibling has to kind of raise the younger siblings.
Hmm.
Were your
I did do that.
parents So were your parents like always busy working, or what was
Yeah.
their kind of work life
Yeah, my
like?
parents, okay, so my parents, their work was very um like it was very inconsistent. So I know that my dad worked at like a manufacturing plant, but I can't remember exactly what it was that he did. And my mom worked at um, a manufacturing plant as well, like making ice cream cones. And I think in one of my episodes, I mentioned she'd always come home with ice cream cones, but like never any ice cream. But we still ate just the ice cream cone as a snack. And I remember them working a lot. Like it was during the day, they'd go to their regular shift job. And then at night, they'd go and harvest worms. Have you read the book? It's not a Cambodian author, but it's a Lao author,
Uh-huh.
Canadian. It's called How to Pronounce Knife. And it's a
Okay.
book of short stories. And
Okay.
so much of it you wouldn't even know that it's like a Lao family. Like
Yeah.
you would think that it's a Cambodian family because just our what we had to experience and like the sort of jobs that we did too. It just mirrors our experience. Obviously, they went through uh different a different uh war, but it was their experience here coming to Canada was very similar to ours.
Mm.
And I think I identified with a lot of Lao people that way too. And there were a lot of Lao people for me growing up around when I was
Yeah.
up until grade 4. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
So it was like the Lao and Cambodian community together. Like we really uh, were in solidarity of each other with our struggles in a new country. Um, but yeah, I kind of lost track of what I was talking
That's
about.
okay. I'm
My
kind of more glad you mentioned the warm part because the book Landbridge, there's like whole chapters about her family picking up the worms. And I
Oh
think you'll
yes,
find it really fascinating
that's
too.
it. Yes. And then I could smell the dirt on them, like I could smell the wet earth, like in their
Yeah.
clothes. So they would do that. And then something happened to my dad. Well, it was a grade 4. I think I mentioned this in a couple episodes where our neighbor, next door neighbor, we lived in a walk-up apartment and we lived in the basement level. Our next door neighbor, who was also my best friend's mom, she got killed like in robbery gone wrong. And so we left that. And then we went to live with another family. And I remember this clearly too. My dad just came home with, I don't know, his colleague or boss, but something had happened at work where he injured his hand, like his hand got stuck in something. So it was since then my dad's work was like very random. Um, we're on welfare for at a point as well. I remember having to submit my report cards to the social worker, and I remember like having to like go to secondhand stores and we'd wait in line because like you can get like a bunch of clothes and as much as you wanted, and it was only $2 for a bag. Like you just stuff all your clothes and all the clothes in a bag for $2. Remember doing that. Um, I remember like my getting like toys as well. And my friend told me like, oh, you should go with your mom to do that because they can see like how old you are and they'll give you the right toys that way. But I never was interested in like materialistic stuff like that. I was like more into books and reading and watching TV, not really like toys. But yeah, since then my parents have done like a lot of uh work at like the farms, and so
Hmm.
not just fruit but also like flowers and stuff like that, like any outdoor work. Yeah. And I've
Yeah.
done that myself in the summers.
I was gonna say, yeah, like did you have your summer jobs picking berries or doing other things
Yeah, I
or
remember like when I was 12 years old, not even 12. How old was I? Because by 12, I was babysitting my sisters. I was younger than that. On like the weekends when my parents weren't working, they'd bring us to the orchards, and like I picked cherries and it was all piecework. So I'd make like $100 cash a day picking cherries because That's really good too. Now I think about it, I'm like, wow, that was really good. But it was just a game to me. I made it a game, right? And I didn't really look at it as work. I thought it was kind of fun that I like picked faster than a lot of people. And I was like this small girl, and I was like pushing moving the ladders around, and the adults told me not to go up too high, that they'll pick the high ones. And I guess that was part of
Yeah.
why I picked so many cherries, because I got the easy ones.
Oh, that's a
Yeah.
beautiful moment, though. I mean, it goes a lot to show, like, not knowing the context of things when you're an innocent child, and then looking back in hindsight, and you're like, oh, wait a minute, this makes a lot more sense
Yeah, I'm
given
like,
the circumstances.
yeah.
But when you were raising your sisters, like, what was that kind of expectation like? And
Oh, it was in the
you mentioned,
summers. Yeah, in
mhm,
the summers, instead of hiring a babysitter, my parents would go and um I get to go to the farms, and then I would, yeah, my sister, how old was I? I was like in grade five. Was I in grade five? Yeah, grade five, six, seven, eight. It was about like a 3 year period that I was babysitting my sisters. And I basically gave up my summers. I would have to clean the house, change their diapers, um, make dinner for my parents. I didn't make anything
mhm,
complicated. It was just basically like stir fry and
nice.
rice. Yeah, just so that they would have something when they came home to eat, and do the dishes. I never had to do the laundry. But I think that was a lot for like a 12-year-old.
That sounds like a lot for a 12-year-old.
Yeah, 10 to 11, 12.
And
Yeah.
you mentioned your brother was roaming out,
Yeah,
doing whatever he wanted.
he was just doing whatever he wanted. He was just playing outside. Like he's a little kid. So 1990 was the year my sister was born. I probably started looking after her when she was like, yeah, one, two, yeah. So I would have been like 8 or 9. Yeah, when I started looking after
Uh,
them.
so that was your earlier childhood. Like, what
Yeah.
about your kind of teenage years, those
Oh,
rebellious
oh my
years? Was
goodness.
that
Yeah,
the
my
other
teenage
side of the
years.
story?
So we lived in like a townhouse complex when I was grade um grade 5 to 8. Yeah. Yeah, those were the years where I had to look after my sister, and there was this basketball court at the end in the neighborhood, and it was only literally like 6 houses away, and I could hear everyone having fun and stuff, but like my parents considered them to be like the bad kids, and I was never allowed to go play there, even though it was just there. I
So
had to look
can I
after my
ask,
sisters. Yeah,
were these other Cambodian kids
yeah,
then?
they were.
Okay,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah, because there was maybe like 3 or 4 other Cambodian families in the same townhouse complex, but then in the neighborhood there were some other Cambodian people. It's like very multicultural. There were like some black people there and Spanish and some white people, but it was a good. It wasn't like predominantly Cambodian, but there were enough Cambodian people there that you could hear Khmer being spoken outside without any wondering, like, oh, who is that? Who's that Khmer person? Yeah. So in my teenage years, we moved up to the escarpment, and that's where I grew up with a bunch of like white people. And
Sorry,
funny
this
and
is someone who knows nothing about Canadian geography.
oh, the
Like,
escarpment.
where's that? Yeah, where's that in
So
relation?
we were in like downtown Hamilton before. And not in like the nicest neighborhoods, but then we moved up to the escarpment, and the Hamilton, the city government didn't want to create pockets of like poor areas, and they wanted to have some social housing in like more middle class neighborhoods. So we had a house that what we rented a house from the city of Hamilton, and it was 4 bedrooms, split level, with a basement and everything, but only one bathroom. And it was in like a middle class neighborhood with like some other social housing around there too. Like you could see which ones are like the social housing versus like the houses that were owned, because the houses that were owned, the lawns were like well manicured, but the social housing, like the lawns weren't always, it wasn't always the same situation. And just they were built differently. Anyway, so we moved there, and I had friends that had parents that were teachers and,
Hmm.
more not, I wouldn't say like they weren't like lawyers or anything, but like lower middle class, I guess.
Yep.
Yeah. And at that time, by the time I was 16, I was able to work. And plus I was working like for cash before that too. So I was able to like save up money and just buy the stuff that I needed to kind of blend in, wearing like the brand name stuff that I could afford. Yeah. And it was really hard in the beginning too, because I just couldn't afford to do a lot of things that people did, like go out to eat. Yeah, so I worked throughout my teenage years,
Hmm.
and my parents got like less strict. Like I was able to go out and stuff, but I couldn't go out to like, I don't know if they still have this, but there used to be like all ages clubs where, in Canada, you had to be 19. Well, depending on the province, but in Ontario, you had to be 19 to get into a club because there's alcohol being served. But they also catered to like the sub 19 crowd. And if you're like 17, 18, you want to go dancing, you can go to these all ages clubs where that's what you do, but no alcohol served. So people would go to that, and I was never allowed to go to them, which, is you have serious FOMO as a teenager.
Right. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. But
And
I knew also that, my mom was always concerned about me finishing high school just because
mhm.
I'd say like the people that were maybe 5 years older than me or so, they have memories of the of time in Cambodia, right? Whereas obviously I didn't. I was born in a refugee camp, left when I was 3, so I didn't have any recollections of my time prior to Hamilton, Ontario. But these kids that were a few years older than me, they ran into problems, right? They were, in gangs and stuff like that. So my mom saw them and always thought like I would, she's had, both my parents had fears that I would do nothing with my life and just end up work. They were their biggest fear was me doing the same sort of job that they were doing.
I mean, that goes to show a lot about your parents, I think, right? Because I think, there are cases where I think some people feel the need to enter work immediately after high school.
Yeah.
And, there was that maybe extra expectation that you do something different.
Yeah,
But
no,
I'm sure that
she
was also a pressure of some sort too.
Yeah. I mean, even with university, do you know McMaster University? You know, University of Toronto. So
I do know McMaster as well,
yeah.
yeah.
So I didn't even apply to McMaster, even though, my parents' house is in Hamilton. I was like, I'm definitely not going there. I need freedom. Freedom. So I left and I went to London, which isn't too far. So
It's
it
like
was like,
2 hours, right?
yeah, and Toronto was too close because it's only an hour. Yeah.
Yeah.
So London from Hamilton is about a 2 hour drive. And then I also applied to Ottawa. And I was like, oh, do I
Hmm.
want to be that far away? I'm like, oh, I think 2 hours is far enough. So I picked Western
That's
because I
great.
didn't want to be too far away. And I didn't even select my school based on like my future. I was just like, I need to get out, but I also didn't want to be too far away, which is not the best way to approach school, I suppose, but it worked out.
I think when I have friends who've gone to Western University, I feel like they had a similar thought process. So I don't think you're alone in that. They were
Okay.
like, what's not too close to home, but is still in Ontario?
Yeah.
So that sounds right. But London, what was your life like in London, Ontario?
Oh,
Where was your
London.
first time being
Yeah,
free?
yeah. Well, actually, even before that, I spent some time in Quebec City, doing
Okay.
like a French immersion for the summer. I think it was only like
Okay.
6 weeks long. Yeah. So I lived in a dorm in Laval.
Nice.
Yeah, so that was fun, and that was like my first taste of it. But like, I had such homesickness because it was my first time away from my parents, and
Mm.
I bought those long distance cards to call my parents, and like, I I didn't expect myself to miss them so much. Yeah, and maybe because I just missed the comforts of home too. But that sort of prepared me for my time away at Western as well. Um, basically when I went to Western, I just reinvented myself. Like nobody knew about my background. I was working, so I was working part-time, so I could kind of just blend in with everyone else. And I'd say that Western, it was pretty multicultural as well.
So would
So
you say you identified more as Cambodian and Western, or were you still just like that one Asian
I was
kid
just
or
no, I wasn't just that one Asian kid. My roommate, I stayed at a residence called Essex, and it was basically like an apartment. And it was there was a kitchen in there, a small living space, and then two washrooms and four bedrooms. So one of my roommates, she's Jamaican Chinese, like her parents are from Jamaica, but they're of Chinese descent. And I connected with her because she was of Asian heritage and we just liked the same music. We ate the same food and we often cooked together and went out to eat together. So I had a connection with her and we just ended up having like the same sort of group of friends too. And I met my now husband there at Western. Yeah.
nice?
Yeah, it was a good 4 years. It was fun. It was the
Totally.
time of my life. Yeah.
And I'm curious, did you end up moving to British Columbia for love then, or was
Yeah,
that
I
like
did.
a
Yeah. Yeah. After university, I was like, what am I gonna do? So I took a postgrad at Seneca College for corporate communications. And the reason why I chose that over like other programs, well, first of all, I am like at 1 month before graduation, I was like, I don't know what I'm gonna do. I don't know what I'm gonna do. Like, what am I gonna do? So I chose corporate communications, and there were other programs offered at other schools. The same program offered at other schools, but I picked Seneca because I was able to integrate travel into that as well because they offered an exchange program. So I went to Belgium for a semester, and I had the time of my life there too.
That's awesome. I'm glad you got to actually experience all of those different moments, even if growing up it
Yeah.
felt a bit more, I think, like close knit and you were being told what you had to do.
Yeah, I
But
felt a bit more like Western in that way, like
mhm,
my parents, we wouldn't have had the money to. I
yeah.
had to find an excuse to explore. Like I couldn't just like go off and
Mhm,
take 6 months off school and go traveling. Like that would have been viewed as a waste of time and money.
yeah.
So I had to find a way to like kind of explore like different parts of the world without actually wasting time and money. Yeah, so that's how I did it.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Makes sense. Can I ask how your parents reacted to, hey, I'm moving to, live with the love of my life across the
Oh, yeah,
country?
yeah, okay. So it wasn't until like 2008. So we graduated in 2004. So we did long distance for like 4 years. And it was like a lot of back and forth flying, but I was adamant about not having any student loans either because I took out student loans for my 4 years. So I paid off my student loans, and that's why I lived with my parents for those 4 years after graduating. But then when it was time to move, I was like, man, we can't do this long distance thing for much longer. Like something needs to happen. And he convinced me to move to Vancouver, and me being like, I'm too good for Hamilton. like, I'm like, yeah, okay, I'll go to Vancouver. It didn't take much convincing. It seemed like more an adventure for me to go there than for him
Hmm.
to come to Hamilton. So yeah, my parents, they didn't, my mom was always the messenger. And it wasn't later on that I found out that like it was my dad. She told me a lot of the times it was my dad telling her like that she needs to say something to me. My dad
Hmm.
never really talked to me about that sort of stuff. It was always my mom. And it's funny now. It's just, I feel kind of bad now because now I understand that it wasn't my mom who was the bad guy. And I always looked at her as the mean one, the bad
Hmm.
parent. Yeah. My mom, when we told her, so Ian, my husband, he flew over, and my mom did not like it because I didn't tell her. I was too scared to tell her. So he's like, okay, I'll fly over and we'll talk to her together.
He'll be your ally.
Yeah, yeah. So she obviously already knew him by then, and
Hmm.
then she was concerned about like what would people say. What are
Mhm.
people going to think? Like, you guys need to get married first before she goes over. But,
Right.
I'm 22 now. Can't really say anything or do anything. So I just left. Yeah.
Wow. So did you
But
guys end up getting married in Vancouver then?
yeah, we actually didn't get married until 2015.
Okay, okay.
Yeah, like it wasn't a priority for us to get married. Like we've been together for so long, and when 2014 rolled around, he asked me to marry him, and I'm like, okay, yeah, sure. I knew it was coming in some way, but it was just never a thing for me to be
Sure.
like, let's get married. Yeah, because
Yeah,
we're already sort of living that married life. Yeah.
that makes sense.
Yeah, it's like my
And
parents just eventually accepted it. She didn't want
right.
me to move over. She wanted Ian to come into Hamilton and all that. And it's just, you can't really tell your kids what to do.
Absolutely. And can I ask, have you been able to kind of like mend some of that relationship with your
Oh
mom
yeah,
now that
yeah,
you
yeah.
know that about her? And I'm assuming you having your own children and her getting grandkids also probably helps in that in some
Yeah,
way.
it's I growing up, I never really had affection. She didn't show much affection towards me.
Right.
I always thought that she was like mean,
Mm,
but maybe I don't know. I never really analyzed, I never really looked into it, but I understand it more why she was that way. And I remember in the summer, my sister-in-law, um, she's like, "Oh, your mom asked me, like, did you know Vanny was on a podcast and she said that I hit her? I never hit her." I'm like, "What is she on about? She definitely spanked me." And she's like, "I don't remember hitting her." I'm like, "Oh my goodness." Like kids remember that stuff, even if it's just
hmm.
one time.
Right.
And I don't
And
think she doesn't realize like how traumatizing that is when your parent like spanks
right.
you. Even though it
And
wasn't like it wasn't like getting whipped or anything, but still like you're scared. Yeah,
and I think it goes into, what we call like selective memory, right? Like you only kind of remember the
the good stuff.
maybe the light
Yeah,
and the day shine, right? You
yeah.
don't remember the dark stuff as much.
Hmm.
Especially as you get older, I think there have been studies that tell us that you fixate more on those good moments and you kind of what's it, invalidate those experiences that aren't always the best when they did involve, your children sometimes. So
Hmm.
I
I
think it's
see.
definitely true.
Yeah, I see. I don't know. Maybe it's her way of making up for how she raised us, because I see her like telling my kids she loves them like after every phone call. Still haven't heard it from her. But she shows it in a different way. Like
Yeah.
she will always make extra food for us. Like when she visits, like she's basically like our housekeeper. She knows what to do. She cleans up and she just makes herself like super useful, and she just cooks anything that we ask her to, and
Hmm.
that's her love language. And I understand that.
Yeah. And one thing that I guess I haven't really been asking about, but I'm curious about through all of these different phases that you've told me about, is like, where is yourself with your Khmer heritage and your
I didn't have
claiming of your identity as
Yeah.
I'm Cambodian? Where is that in this story?
Yeah, it didn't. I
Mhm.
never I never had any desire to really learn about it. Like I kind of just went through the motions when I went to the celebrations, and I never inquired like, "Oh, why do we do this?" I never dove deep into it. And it wasn't until I think I mentioned it on my episode. It wasn't even really like a one-time thing. It was more of like a collection of things. It was in 2020 when during the pandemic, and my daughter, who was only 2 at the time, she was watching TV, and I'm like, this isn't right. This, like, there's got to be more to life than this. Like, why am I in front of a computer and my daughter is watching TV all day? This is ridiculous. And I know it wasn't going to be like that forever, but like, how is that any different from putting her into daycare for someone else to, well, it is different because someone else is taking care of her, but like I just, it didn't sit right with me. And then, all these things happening with the Black Lives Matter movement, a lot of what they said resonated with me and our community struggles too. How what one person said was that like she was really
Mm-hmm.
tired of just connecting through trauma. Like we don't really need to,
Mm-hmm.
we do need to talk about our trauma and we need to talk it out. And but let's not forget the fact that that we've done a lot too. And can we please let everyone know that we're awesome and not just these victims? So that's sort of what I wanted to do when in 2020, and I just didn't know what it was. And I was just doing a lot of reading, and I started like reading about like uh, the African American history, and then it kind of answered my questions. Well, not answered my questions, but it sort of made me realize like why I identified with their music so much too.
Mm-hmm.
And um I just in like over the like between 2020 and 2024, I was just reading a lot and listening to a lot of podcasts too. And I don't know how it came about, but I'm like, oh, well, I don't see any stories of the idea just came to me one day. I'm like, I don't see any stories of like the Cambodian people. Like we touched on this earlier about jungle Asian and being underestimated, and so I wanted to kind of combat that narrative of what Cambodian people are like and show our community that the default isn't you know um the default isn't what we grew up with. Like we have people in our community that are doing brilliant things, and let's celebrate that, and also be show show the outside people outside our community what we're doing, and um shift the narrative also to not just talking about the Khmer Gaham, but talking about how we can help each other in the future too, sort of like what the Jewish community do, where they hire people within their community and uplift each other. I want to do that. The Cambodian community has like this sort of uh, mistrust
Mm-hmm.
within the community because you know of what happened, and you don't really know who. And I think it's sort of become the mentality that has seeped into our generation too and the generation beyond. But I think I want to change that. I don't want there to be mistrust in our community. I want there to be like celebration and uplifting and not be jealous of each other. There's a lot of like gossip in our community about like who's doing what.
I'm so glad you talked about this because, one thing just listening to, your own episode I was thinking about is how you're also saying like, oh, these were all these experiences that we've had and like we just didn't have a platform to kind of share them and also for them to understand that these are universal experiences, right? That these can really teach not just Cambodians, but like people like myself, we're not from the Cambodian community, we're allies, but these feelings, these are, universal sometimes. And
Mm-hmm.
I think we need to do a better job kind of connecting our different narratives and histories because there's so much to be said about, okay, like how do we go about trusting one another? How do we go about rebuilding our cultures? How do we go about healing, right? And this is not something that's going to stop now, right? Like we see time and time again genocide keeps being an issue. So if that's the case, there's going to be new people displaced, right? Like it was Syrian refugees a few years ago. Now it's
Mm-hmm.
going to be a lot of Palestinians and people from Sudan, right? So I think these will be important questions to keep thinking about, but I definitely think that, community trust, pride in, kind of navigating that so we can kind of get over ourselves in order to like kind of be together as a community. That's what we need to
Hmm.
do.
Hmm. Yeah, I'm curious to know what the perception is like in Ontario and Quebec with the Cambodian community because it is
Yeah.
bigger and when there's more people, it tends to be more established too.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, there's nowhere that people can go to for the Khmer community where if it's not the temples, then you're kind of like, okay, I'm not religious. I don't practice Buddhism. Um, but I'm still interested in our culture and our
Yeah.
heritage. So, but I don't want to be in like that potent Buddhist, that strong Buddhist environment. Yeah.
It can feel very top down sometimes too, right? Like I think you were saying in that example, like the gatekeepers of the knowledge, the ones that only ones who have the rightful claim to heritage, right? And I think the beauty of not just the Khmer experience, but a lot of refugee experiences is like we can transform what that culture means, right?
Hmm.
And like earlier you were talking about, for African Americans and hip hop, like why was that such an important piece of history is not only because of it being, a very successful genre and creating revenue and a pop culture maybe. It was fundamentally about redefining their own heritage through music and kind of emphasizing the problems that they had, right? And so I think this beauty of kind of we need to integrate our flaws into our culture as well and not pretend like we only have one cultural art form.
Hmm. Hmm.
And, I can only talk about this tangentially because I'm not Cambodian, but one of the things that I noticed while in Lowell is there's this really interesting tension between Khmer dance and the next generation of dancers. And the reason I bring that up is because Khmer dance is always traditionally in the Apsara form has been danced by women. But then there's this question of what do we do for queer Cambodians, people who have identities that don't necessarily prescribe to that dance form or that art form. And
Hmm.
so it was really beautiful to kind of listen to the community and hear about how they were trying to navigate some of what they have experienced in dance, but transform that, knowing that they are the bearers of a cultural knowledge that was almost wiped out by the Khmer Rouge, and then still taking that responsibility and not ignoring it, but we are going to build on top of that. And I think that's a really beautiful example of how the community kind of continues moving forward.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's amazing. And it's a reflection of that like culture morphs.
Yes.
It's not static.
Not stagnant. Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny because I remember seeing something about language and it can also be applied to traditions
Hmm.
where the immigrants of a community are what immigrants are sorry, the immigrants of community are what like the people of given country were like in like the 1960s because
Mm.
they went to the new country and kept their traditions and
Right.
kept the like they talked the same way. They didn't have other influences like people in their homelands do. So, for
Hmm.
example, I remember talking to Soka from France, and she's fluent in Khmer. Like she grew up speaking
Hmm.
Khmer with her grandmother, but she's like, I spoke like an old lady from the 1960s because that's how I learned
Yeah.
Khmer. I was talking to my grandmother and watching these movies that spoke like that. So when I went to Cambodia, they spoke, they used words that I never learned. And
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, so it was just sort of like it was captured in time, like the how we practice certain traditions now and how we don't want to um we don't want to change anything because that's how it originally was. But it's funny now because when you go back to Cambodia, there are other influences and it's morphed. It's not like you said, it's not stagnant.
That's such a beautiful and funny example because I think of my parents too, and the way I speak Tamil is probably from the 80s,
Yeah.
like they're also a little time capsule in a way.
Yeah.
But I am curious in the kind of differences maybe that you've noticed. Like now that you've started this podcast, like you've been talking to French Cambodians, you've been talking to Cambodian Americans. Is
Hmm.
there something you think is like particular to each of these experiences, or do you feel like there are a lot more commonalities than there are necessarily differences.
I think there's more commonalities. I've been speaking a lot with Cambodian Americans, just there's
Hmm.
more.
Yes.
And I do think that there are more commonalities than differences. The differences come more when we are adults,
Hmm.
but I think growing up, um, it just depends on where you are too. But if you're around more white people, I see the same similarities as when growing up in France versus the States, Minnesota, where
Hmm.
um, there were more white people in there. And I forget the city that or town that she grew up in, but she was the only Asian in the class. I think that
Yeah.
was the title of, yeah. So I saw the similarities there, but I don't know. It's a unique, everyone has their own unique experience, but of course you can draw similarities from um, everyone's stories and obviously draw
Hmm.
differences.
Yeah. Were there any pertinent differences too that you noticed outside of the kind of commonalities you had growing up?
Well, I was actually surprised that in the Netherlands, I was talking to the Cheerted, and his family and other families. It was the Dutch government's policy to assign a social worker to incoming
Um,
refugee families to help them integrate into society better. But we didn't get that in Canada or the US. And I wonder if, like, you know, we still don't get it. I don't think we do.
yeah.
I don't think the
No.
refugee families get any sort of like assistance in integrating. I think they rely on the existing community to do that. Because when we came to Canada, I remember this Cambodian family that arrived before us. They were the ones who helped us a lot with like telling us where to get things and um, where to go to like
Hmm.
not only buy things but like to get help and stuff. Yeah.
So it was like a crowdsourcing of information from other
Yeah,
people who
pretty
were in
much.
place.
Yeah. So, and it's funny because I remember reading or watching something about what the US did, how they tried to disperse people in different communities so as not to create a community, but they never actually help like family A integrate into society. But how if you're not going to put them into a community that will help them integrate, how are they supposed to integrate if you're not going to offer help outside of the community?
Right.
I
It
don't know
was
if
this
they,
fundamental tension.
yeah, is that I can't remember where I saw that, but then what they found was people gravitated towards other people of the same community anyway, so it didn't really help. Like even though they put them there, they ended up like moving to
Exactly.
Cambodian communities or whatever it is.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think one thing that I'm always struck by is when asking people to tell me their bios, they usually explain like, oh, I was actually first processed in refugee, resettlement, which is like Catholic aid agencies or religious groups usually in like the middle of America, like Kentucky or Iowa or Kansas or somewhere. And then
Uh,
they're like, after like a year or two, I just moved to where there were more Cambodians, right?
yeah. Yeah.
I think that exactly goes to your point for
Yeah. They
sure.
didn't have support and you're looking for not only support, but like just connection.
Hmm.
How do you connect with people who don't understand like what you're going through?
Definitely.
Yeah.
And those connections, I think, do say a lot about the lives that we end up living. And one of those kind of questions I had is, how disparate your life turned out to be from your siblings, right? Because I think in a way, siblings are our closest doppelgangers in a way. Like we have the same set of circumstances, we have the same families, but we don't always end up doing the same thing. So I'm
Hmm.
curious in like your own case, like what ended up happening to your baby sisters you helped raise or your brother who was
Yeah.
more free?
Yeah. My brother, he's in St. Catharines, so he has his own
Okay.
family. He has a daughter and wife. He's doing fine. Yeah, they are living happily in St. Catharines with their, I think they have another dog now. I can't remember.
Hmm.
Anyways, my sister, I have two sisters. Um, Cindy is, I don't know where she is. She's somewhere in the GTA. She's visiting me in October. She seems to move around a lot. I don't know.
Cool.
And then Lena lives with my parents in the basement.
Okay, that's
And
awesome.
I think she told me she got a new job. She's in accounting in some capacity and she's looking to buy a house. But yeah, everyone's doing
Mhm.
well. Yeah.
And do you think they all kind of have a similar gravitation towards their heritage or their identity, or
No,
are you kind of the one that
well,
is the
I think
most?
I'm the loudest.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I think they are interested, but I am definitely the loudest because I've
Hmm.
always been the loudest.
It's
The
the
my
first
brother,
child.
yeah, my brother's pretty reserved. He's easygoing guy, like didn't really get mad at anything.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, whereas if I was not pleased with something, I will say it.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I am kind of curious about that related question of what do you tell your daughter and like your son about their heritage and kind of their culture, and how is that process of teaching the next
Well,
generation?
they don't really. Here's the thing: like my son is 5 years old, and he can't really understand the difference between like a city, a country, a province, and a continent. Like we try to tell him, but he doesn't understand it. He's like, "Mommy, are we going to Cambodia?" I'm like, "What do you mean?" He's like, "We're going to Ye's house." I'm like, "No, Ye lives in Canada." He's like, "Oh, but it's so far away." I'm like, "I know, but it's another side of the country." So I think,
That's cute.
yeah, so he's too young to kind of understand that. He knows that he's half Cambodian and half British or English. And my daughter, she's starting to understand it a bit more. Like she knows where like Asia is, and but we don't practice anything. I'm sort of discovering it myself now.
Hmm.
And we started a Khmer language class
Yeah.
in September, and she asked if she's going to be part of it. I was like, no, you have swimming. And she's like, oh, how come? I want to go. So I think she's mentioned it a few times. So I'm going to bring her to Khmer language class because that's going to be
Yeah.
an easy way for her to see other kids, learning Khmer. And
Hmm.
then when you're learning Khmer, you learn stuff about our culture too. And I think it'll be good for her to see that. Yeah.
Yeah. And can you still be one of the people to teach your Khmer? Like, do you
Oh no,
speak
I don't
it pretty
speak.
fluent?
No, I don't speak it fluently at all. Yeah, I think I definitely my time capsule Khmer is like grade one. I speak or
Hmm.
kindergarten. Yeah, it's very elementary. I don't know how
Yeah.
to read or write it, but that's definitely one of my goals.
That's wonderful. And can I ask,
Yeah,
since starting this podcast, like, where do you want to go? Like, what's the future you're dreaming of with all of this?
I want to be able. I wanted to share this with my kids too. Leave a
Hmm.
legacy for them and show them like what Khmer people are capable of and be proud of who they are and let them know because a lot of the stories that are shared on my podcast, there's a lot of history
Hmm.
that is shared as well. So,
Hmm.
they'll get an understanding of what happened in Cambodia. My daughter understands that a really bad man told people to kill other people in Cambodia, but that's the extent that she is aware of. She doesn't know the background behind it. She doesn't know like the time prior to it. And I didn't really know the details either until, I
Right.
started looking into this. So she's probably, by the time she's like 10, she'll probably be ahead of me at my age, like 3, 4 years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's the information revolution though, right? Like you
Yeah.
can't gatekeep the internet,
Hmm.
and maybe we all would have been a little more smart than we are growing up.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
So
it's
what do I want
different.
to do with this? I want to keep explore. I want to get more people from like Australia and different countries just because I'm curious about their experience too. I think I have a better understanding of what it's like in the US. I definitely want to talk to more people. Maybe like I haven't talked to anyone in New York, so I'm curious to see what life was like in, the eastern part of the States. Yeah, I want to keep interviewing people, and I want to also start another podcast, but I don't know how I'm going to do it, my full-time job.
Yes.
Um, I want to start one where I'm reading books by
Mhm.
authors of Southeast Asian heritage, just because, we're not, Cambodia is not in a vacuum, and our experiences aren't like that either. Like there's a lot of influences that affected how Cambodia is now and also the diaspora. So I want to explore that more. And I want to grow the Cambodian Cultural Center as well,
Yeah.
because I mean, we're going at a good pace. We've sold out our second event again. Um,
Congratulations.
thank you. Yeah. People are hungry for it here. We never had anything like that. Like Lowell,
Exactly.
Long Beach, they've been doing it for years, right? Decade or not decades, but like 10,
Decades,
15,
actually,
in the 80s, yeah. So yeah,
in
I
the
guess
80s.
like yeah, but we didn't have anything like that. And I think it was
Yeah.
only recently in Montreal where there was a big festival.
Yeah.
Yeah, I want to get the community celebrations bigger here all
That's
across
amazing.
Canada. Yeah. Yeah.
And as
And
you kind of think about that, what do you think of that notion of healing still? Do you think you're able to kind of heal some of the parts of your own, inner child? And do you
you
feel
know,
like
it's
there is healing
it's
out there?
yeah, it's one of the effects of my podcast was that I found it to be very therapeutic, like hearing other
Mhm.
people's stories and knowing that like it wasn't just me. Because when you're growing up, you don't talk about your feelings that way. And
Yeah.
it was reaffirming to hear that, people you feel this guilt. And I told one of my guests this too. He's like, but nothing I felt was like comparable to what he went through. I'm like, well, that doesn't invalidate how you actually feel. And I have to keep reminding myself that too. I'm like, well, why am I feeling sorry for myself? Like, why when this is nothing compared to what other people go through. I'm like, you know what? If I'm
Mhm.
feeling sad, then that's how I feel. There's
Yeah.
no reason why I should say I shouldn't feel that way. Like, just it's part of being human to have
Yeah.
feelings. But I think we never really talked about it growing up too, because parents were always working and too tired to talk as well. And I don't know if it's in our culture to not talk about our feelings, or if it's just because they were so tired. So I
Yeah.
can't differentiate between that.
That makes sense. And I think that will always be the perennial question in a way. Like, when is the right time and if there ever will be a right time, right? And I think there's always going to be a tension between our own healing, right, as kids of survivors of really traumatic events and the things that we experienced growing up, like the things that your mom was invalidating with your sister-in-law, for instance, right? Versus like us also trying to help them through
Mm-hmm.
everything that they've experienced, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the core example I always give is like I think my sister and I have two very different realities of like how we processed our trauma. And mine was like, let me go talk to a bunch of other people that also went through the same experience and like hear
Mm-hmm.
their stories because it's also healing for me in a way to do the
Mm-hmm.
interview work that I do. And then for her, it was like, I need to give myself some space to do my own thing and be kind of independent from my family's story altogether. And I don't think there's one right way to process the
Mm-hmm.
trauma, right? So I think understanding the multiplicity or the the many futures that we could do in relation to our shared history or our shared experience of what our parents experienced. So, yeah, it's just to say that
Yeah.
it is really complicated and it won't ever be a straightforward answer in my own
Yeah.
perspective. One final question, if that's okay. I know we're almost at a
Yeah.
couple hours here, but one thing I always ask my interviewees is if you had to explain what it meant to be Cambodian in your generation, in your own words, it could be a phrase, it could be a set of words, it could be anything, but what would you say?
Being Cambodian should be a source of pride
And why did you choose that phrase?
because when I was growing up, I wasn't always proud to be Cambodian. And I didn't know why. And I think it was because I just wanted to fit in and just live like a Canadian person. But now that, I understand our history more and I see the beauty of our heritage and hearing the stories of our community and our elders, I appreciate it so much more. And I see that it's not a source of it's not a source of shame at all to be Cambodian. And in fact, it is a source of pride because of our history, of what we've been through and what we've been able to accomplish as a community and where we're headed. Because I do see sort of like this revitalization or renaissance of people just being more curious about our roots.
Right. Like seeing the Khmer Renaissance post, hearing about
Yeah,
the artwork that they do and, Vanda's,
yeah.
performances here and all that kind of stuff. There definitely is this resurgence and this revitalization that I think is important to highlight. But I think it goes back to your origin story, right? Of why you started the podcast. Like, why not we celebrate and center joy
Mm-hmm.
instead of centering death?
Mm-hmm.
And that's not to say that those two things are opposites, right? I think we can take seriously that they're important pieces of the same coin, but maybe one has been talked about a lot more than the other recently.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's one of the beautiful things that your work has been doing. So
Oh,
thank you for sharing your
thanks.
podcast too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Saran, for reaching out to me and asking me to share my story as part of your dissertation. But I also want to thank you for doing this work, drawing in the similarities with what has happened in Cambodia and to our community, along with what has more recently happened in Sri Lanka and your community. I look forward to reading about your findings in the book. And if you would like to connect with Saran, he is available on Instagram and his handle is spelled Sironion. We'll be back in 2 weeks with part 2 of Khmer Voices Turns 1. I really appreciate all your support. Thank you so much for listening. Samakutran.